Question. Shmu, why doesn't God want us to kindle a fire on Shabbat? Great question, and one that gets right to the heart of what Shabbat is trying to do to us and for us. The Torah says explicitly in Shmot, Exodus 35:3, that we should not kindle fire on Shabbat. At first glance, it feels oddly specific. Why fire? Why single that out? There are a few layers to how Jewish tradition understands it. First is the fact that sparking or kindling a fire equals the symbol of human mastery. Fire is one of humanity's great power tools. Once we humans controlled fire, everything changed. Metalworking, cooking, manufacturing, engines, electricity. In the ancient world, lighting a fire meant you were beginning productive activity. So the Torah singles it out as a classic example of melacha, or creative, world-shaping work. Hashem's message to us is, one day a week, stop being the engineer of the universe. No building, no transforming raw materials, no pushing the world to produce, just exist in it. Frankly, if the Torah were written today, it might have said, don't flip the power switch. To our sages and rabbis, electricity is basically the equivalent of a modern fire. Secondly, Jewish tradition teaches that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. On Shabbat, we imitate that pattern. Fire is the act that transforms matter, wood into heat, ore into metal, sand into glass. It's the beginning of industry. By not lighting a fire, we symbolically say, the world is finished enough. I don't need to improve it today. That's actually a radical idea. Most of our lives are spent fixing, building, improving, producing. Shabbat says, pause the project of creation. Then we have to consider the psychological brilliance of it, and this is where it gets almost suspiciously smart. When you can't light a fire, or today, turn on electricity, cook from scratch, drive, etc., it forces preparation beforehand. Everything must already be ready. Result? Before Shabbat food is prepared, the house arranged and cleaned, all laborious work is finished, all phones and modern-day devices such as computers, televisions, radios, etc. are turned off, and no errands. What's left? Time, presence, family time, prayer, learning. In other words, the rule about fire quietly engineers an entire day that cannot become ordinary. And finally, the deeper spiritual idea is focused on. Our rabbis say something bold. Shabbat is a taste of the world to come. In Jewish thought, the perfected world is one where we aren't struggling to control nature anymore, and the lighting of a fire represents control. Not lighting it represents trust. For one day a week, we live as if the world is already redeemed. If humanity had invented Shabbat in Silicon Valley, the commandment might read, thou shalt not debug the universe for 24 hours. And honestly, we're terrible at that, which is why the rule has teeth. One final thought that must be mentioned and taken seriously. The commandment not to kindle a fire on Shabbat is best understood through the oral law, as explained in the Talmud. The written verse by itself is brief, but the rabbinic tradition clarifies how it is meant to be applied in daily life. In practice, the prohibition focuses on starting a fire for acts of food preparation, such as cooking, baking, or reheating food. It does not forbid benefiting from fire that was prepared beforehand. Light and warmth that are already in place before Shabbat begins may still be used. In other words, the intention was never that people should sit in darkness or endure the cold. Jewish law assumes that homes are prepared in advance so that Shabbat can be experienced in comfort and dignity. Interpretations that suggest Hashem expects his people to suffer through darkness or freezing conditions misunderstand the spirit and the practical guidance of the tradition. Thanks to the viewer for that important question. If you too have questions as it pertains to Hashem's Torah, please feel free to ask. You can put your enquiry in the comments section below or email them to me at shmu@startmail.com. Also, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share with others. Until next time, this is Shmuel ben Shlomi wishing you a hearty shalom.